My entire family held a normal dinner where no one mentioned the missing person we all secretly knew was gone, and I only found out the truth years later through a hidden voicemail. I was 14 when it happened. At the time, I didn't have the words for what felt wrong. I just remember sitting at that table and noticing something that didn't match the way everyone was acting. It was my uncle's chair that bothered me most. It was still there. Same spot. Same scratched wood on the armrest where he always tapped his fingers when he talked too much. But that night, it was empty in a way that felt intentional. Not like someone was late, not like someone had stepped out. More like someone had been erased, but the space they used to occupy was still being respected. I remember asking where he was. It wasn't a dramatic question, just something casual. I think I said his name like I normally would. And that's when the first strange thing happened. Nobody answered me, not immediately, not even a glance. My mom just kept serving food. My dad adjusted his napkin like I hadn't spoken. My cousin kept scrolling on his phone. It felt like my question had fallen under the table. I laughed a little, uncomfortable. "Where's Uncle Ramon?" That's when my aunt finally spoke. "He's not coming tonight," she said. Her voice was too calm, too practiced. I nodded like that made sense, but it didn't because my uncle never missed dinners, ever. He was the kind of person who showed up even when no one invited him properly. I remember looking around the table again, expecting someone to explain more, but no one did. And that was the first moment I felt it, not fear, not yet, just absence, a very specific kind of silence that didn't feel natural. Dinner went on like nothing happened, plates clinking, rice being served, conversation shifting around safe topics like weather and school. But every time I looked at my uncle's empty chair, I noticed something else. No one else looked at it, not once. At first, I thought I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just avoiding awkwardness. But then I noticed something worse. They weren't avoiding it, they were deliberately ignoring it, like the chair wasn't even there. I remember dropping my spoon at one point. It clattered louder than it should have. Still, nobody reacted. That's when I first felt a small knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. After dinner, I tried asking my mom again when we were in the kitchen. "Why didn't Uncle Ramon come?" She paused for a moment too long. Then she said, "He's busy." That was it. No explanation, no detail, just busy. But I remember looking at her face while she said it. Her eyes didn't meet mine fully. It was like she was trying to finish the conversation before it started. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the chair, about how everyone avoided it, about how no one said his name after I asked. At some point, I convinced myself it was just adult behavior I didn't understand. But that didn't explain the feeling, that heavy, suffocating sense that something had been carefully placed out of reach. Years passed after that dinner. Life moved on the way it does when something unresolved gets buried under routine. School, friends, phones, new problems replacing old ones. But there was always a strange gap in my memory when it came to my uncle. I realized I had no clear recollection of him after that night. No more visits, no more jokes, no more loud presence in the house, just silence. And every time I tried to bring him up casually, the reaction was the same: short answers, quick topic changes, a discomfort that didn't belong to the question itself, but to something underneath it. I stopped asking, not because I forgot, because I started to feel like asking was wrong, like I was stepping on something I wasn't supposed to touch. When I was 19, my grandmother passed away. That was when everything started to crack. Families behave differently during grief. I knew that much, but I didn't expect the house to feel like it was holding its breath. It was during the cleanup after the funeral that I found the first real clue. It wasn't dramatic, just a small wooden box in the back of a cabinet. No label, no name. Inside were old cassette tapes and a single voicemail recorder device. I didn't even know we still had something like that. I asked my cousin about it. He went pale for a second, then said, "That's probably nothing, just old stuff." But the way he said it made it very clear it was not nothing. That night, curiosity won. I took the box to my room. I told myself I was just looking, that I'd put everything back. One of the tapes was already labeled in faded handwriting. "Ramon, do not delete." My hands actually stopped moving when I saw that name, my uncle's name. The same uncle nobody talked about properly. The same uncle whose chair had sat empty for no reason I was allowed to understand. I sat there for a long time just holding the tape. Then I found something else. A voicemail recorder, old, dusty, still functional somehow. It had a single message saved, no timestamp visible, just a play button. I hesitated a lot, then I pressed it. At first there was static, then a breath, then my mother's voice, but not the voice I knew. It was lower, controlled, careful. "I don't know if anyone will ever hear this," she said. My stomach dropped immediately. There was a pause, then she continued. "If you're listening to this, then it means we followed through." A long silence, then something worse. "He didn't make it back from the trip. We agreed not to say it out loud." I stopped breathing. My uncle, a trip? I had never heard about any trip. The message continued. "Ramon's absence will be easier if we don't give it weight. We already told the others what to say." Others, that word stuck in my head, she continued. If anyone asks, just say he left. It's cleaner this way. Then the voicemail ended. I just sat there, completely still, because none of that matched my memory. My uncle didn't leave. He didn't go on a trip. He had just disappeared from conversation, from reality, from that dinner. I played it again, then again, each time hoping I misunderstood something. But the words stayed the same. We agreed not to say it out loud. That line kept repeating in my head. Because it wasn't just about hiding the truth. It sounded like a decision, a coordinated one, and I was part of the family that followed it, even if I hadn't known. That night I couldn't stay in my room. I walked through the house quietly like I was searching for something without knowing what it was. Every room felt slightly off, like it had been edited. I found my mom in the kitchen. She saw my face and immediately knew something was wrong. "What did you find?" she asked. That question confirmed everything, because she didn't ask, "Did you find something?" She asked what? I told her about the voicemail, about the tape, about Uncle Ramon. Her expression didn't change much, but her hands did. They tightened around the counter like she was bracing for impact. "I was hoping you wouldn't find that," she said quietly. That sentence changed everything, because it meant it wasn't forgotten, it was hidden on purpose. I asked her what happened, really happened, not the vague answers, not the busy or left or trip. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down at the table, the same table from that dinner years ago, and for the first time I noticed something strange. The house felt like it remembered that night too. She finally spoke. "He didn't disappear at dinner," she said. My chest tightened. "He disappeared before it." That didn't make sense. She saw my confusion, then added something worse. "We just didn't know how to stop acting normal after we already started." I asked her to explain, and what she told me didn't feel like a single story. It felt like pieces that had been separated on purpose. My uncle had gone on a trip with 2 family members, something about paperwork, property, a short drive to settle an issue in another province. They never came back together. Only one returned. The story given to the rest of us was carefully constructed. Accident, miscommunication, distance. But internally, the family had agreed on something else. Not to talk about it, not to define it, not to give it shape, because shape makes things real, and real things require consequences. But I kept circling back to one thing, that dinner. "If he was already gone," I said, "why was his chair still there?" My mother closed her eyes for a moment, then said something I will never forget. "Because removing it would have made it real for your grandfather." That's when I understood. The dinner wasn't about pretending nothing happened. It was about preserving someone else's sanity. But that still didn't explain why I wasn't told, or why I was allowed to sit through that silence without knowing. I asked her that. Her answer was simple. "You were too young to help carry it." That should have made me feel protected. It didn't. It made me feel excluded from something that shaped my entire childhood without my consent. But the deeper I went into it, the more contradictions I found, because I started asking other relatives, carefully, casually, and their answers didn't match. One said he left abroad, another said he had a falling out, another refused to speak at all, and just one looked at me and said, "You shouldn't be asking that." That was the first time I felt real fear, not of what happened, but of how many versions of the truth existed, and why none of them felt complete. Months passed. I kept replaying the voicemail, searching for details I missed. Eventually, I noticed something strange in the background audio. A faint sound, like wind or maybe water or something mechanical. I took it to a friend who studied audio engineering. He listened once, then asked me where I got it. I told him it was family related. He didn't ask more questions, but he did say something that stuck with me. "That's not a clean recording, it's been cut." I asked what he meant. He said there was a splice in the audio, a moment where something had been removed, a silence that didn't belong naturally, something between words, something hidden. That's when things got worse. Because if part of the message was removed, then I wasn't hearing the full truth. I went back to my mother. I told her what I learned. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked tired, like she had been expecting this conversation for years. "There was more," she said finally, but she didn't continue immediately. Instead, she said something that still haunts me. "We didn't think anyone would ever go looking again." Then she told me the part they never wrote down. The trip wasn't just logistical. There was an argument, something financial, something about land and inheritance that had been building tension for years. And during that trip, things escalated, not in the way people expect, not loudly, but in a way that left consequences no one knew how to name. And when it ended, the family didn't agree on what had happened. So instead of fighting over the truth, they removed it from language entirely. No mention, no discussion, no definition. And over time, silence became tradition. That dinner wasn't planned as a deception. It was just continuation. A habit that had already started before I was even aware of it. But what I can't stop thinking about is this. If silence can be inherited, then what else was passed down to me without explanation? Because after that night, I started noticing other gaps, other avoided names, other chairs that no one wanted to sit near. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that voicemail in my head. Not the words, but the pause between them, because that's where the truth was hiding, or maybe where it was removed. And even now, years later, I still don't know which version is worse. That something happened or that my family agreed it was better if I never fully knew what it was. And sometimes I wonder about that dinner again. The plates, the conversation, the empty chair, and whether I was the only one at that table who hadn't learned how to pretend yet.